The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Very proud to rise representing the New Democratic Party on Bill C-544 from my colleague from the Liberal Party, which I think this bill is very important in order to re-establish some level of trust with the Canadian public. Mr. Speaker, the other day in the House of Commons, I heard a Conservative backbencher stand up and say he was proud to be in the greatest House that had ever been in the history of this Parliament. I'm hoping it was just a case of exuberant naivety, because the opposite is true, that what we've seen under this government is the debasement of participatory democracy. We've seen the debasement of public institutions and the corrosive effect on public trust from the increasing blurring lines between what is supposed to be serving the public interest and serving the very narrow party interest of this government. Mr. Speaker, I saw it. We've seen so many examples of this corrosive impact, but to me it was during the hockey playoffs when I saw an ad for a young woman who was getting a job, being retrained in trades, and how important it was that she was starting her life over. And on Monday morning I was getting calls from unemployed people in my office asking me how they could benefit from this program. And I had to tell them that this program didn't exist, that the ad was lying to Canadian people, that taxpayers' money had been used to promote a program that didn't exist. How do you explain to the Canadian people that you have a government so cynical that they would lie to the unemployed using millions of dollars of taxpayers' money promoting something that doesn't exist? But this is the level of cynicism we see from this government. What we've seen instead of serving the public interest is this increasingly dumbed-down message box that they believe they can spin the public. So you see everyone over on the government side, they stand up like marionettes repeating the same dumbed-down talking points that are often misrepresentations, often lies, completely contrary. If the sun is high in the sky, they'll say it's dark night. If it's dark night, they say the sun is in the sky, and they'll repeat that message again and again and again. It's like all the King's Men with the politician Willie Stark, who believed that if you repeated a lie often enough, it would somehow be true. To counter those lies, to protect those lies, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Essex is rising on point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe it's unparliamentary to suggest, or in this case, to flat out accuse members on this side of the House of lying. I believe that it's parliamentary to suggest other ways of making the point, Mr. Speaker, but the member knows better. He's been here since 2004. He should apologize and retract the unparliamentary language.
Yeah. Before I go to the member for Timmins James Bay, remind honourable members that there are in fact rules in place about what can and cannot be said, and encourage all honourable members. I was distracted for a moment, didn't hear all the comments from the honourable member Timmins James Bay, but I'll give him back the floor if he feels remedial action is necessary. He can make it. If not, the chair would appreciate if he would be mindful of the rules. The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Certainly, Mr. Speaker. I thank you for your intervention there, and I certainly note my colleagues are very uncomfortable with the fact that we talk about the misrepresentation of facts under them. Strikes close to home, and they take this as a matter of privilege. It does speak to the Potemkin democracy. Of course, Mr. Speaker, I understand it's very unparliamentary to accuse someone of lying, and I never would do that. But it's perfectly parliamentary to lie within this tradition. And this is a fact where we see the misrepresentation of fact again and again and again. And as I was saying, Mr. Speaker, that the people who can speak out about that misrepresentation are being silenced. The silencing of our scientists, the shutting down of independent organizations, the use of Canada Revenue Agency to go after everything from bird watchers to environmental groups because they threaten this government's agenda. And then, of course, there's the misuse of advertising. Between $750 and $780 million of taxpayers' money used to promote the same misrepresentation of facts. I don't know what my colleague over there thinks is possibly true about telling people they can get a job through a job training grant when the job training grant does not exist, and taxpayers' money is being used on that. We need to rein this corrosive abuse of power in. We see so many examples. We see the Prime Minister creating his own TV network like he's the great leader from North Korea or something, his 24/7 videos. They go to Iraq and they don't allow the media to film but they have their own embedded, not journalists, but propagandists. And what comes out of that is that soldiers' lives are actually put at stake. We see the member for Nepean Carleton acting as mini-me, deciding he'd run his own propaganda videos, using taxpayers' money and civil servants. This is such a cynical abuse of the public trust. It has to stop. I certainly agree with my Liberal colleague that we need to bring in some kind of rules if we're going to see this kind of abuse of taxpayers' dollars year after year, staggering amounts of money, putting up billboards, shrink-wrapping trains, promoting jobs creation schemes that don't exist. This is not in the public interest. My concern, Mr. Speaker, with my Liberal colleague, Bill, is that the model that we have for putting some kind of protection for the taxpayer is indeed in the province of Ontario that was brought in under the premiership of Dalton McGuinty, and that bill is being gutted right now. It's being gutted by the present Liberal Premier, who was stopped by the Auditor General from Ontario from using Liberal red all over government ads. The Auditor General in Ontario has raised concerns about the Liberal government being able to strip the act so that they could run government ads, i.e. taxpayers paying ads promoting the government during elections. It's the cynical abuse of saying, we won't do it as opposition, but if we get into government, we will do the same thing. Canadians are tired of this. They need to see something better, Mr. Speaker. They need to see that Parliament will rise up and say, it's not going to be just about the party interest. It's not just the party in opposition squawking when it's convenient to squawk at government abuse, but then abusing the same system once that they get in power. So we see this with my colleagues in the Liberal Party, where the new leader promised that he was going to be the defender of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and then folded like a cheap suit on Bill C-51. Said that they were going to have open nominations. He was going to do politics differently. How long did that promise last? I don't even think it was a week before they were into their first lawsuit with candidates. The Liberal leader who just recently wrote to the leaders of all Canada's unions saying that he supported union rights while his own members were attacking collective bargaining on Parliament Hill. These are the corrosive cynicisms that make people believe that they shouldn't trust politicians when they see the naked self-interest being put ahead of fundamental principles. We need, Mr. Speaker, in this House to restore an accountable system that wins the trust of Canadian people. So one of those steps will be this bill brought forward by my colleague, Bill C-544, to limit the ability of government to take taxpayers' money and abuse the public trust with misrepresentations, propaganda, and in some cases outright lies. We need to restore the powers of the independent officers of Parliament to hold parliamentarians to account, because what we see with this government is they use the incredible powers of government to hold their enemies to account, to investigate their enemies while promoting massive secrecy for themselves. We see the Officer of Information saying about how her office has been completely undermined in her ability to make sure that we have open access to information. Why is this important? It's important because the ability of the Canadian public to hold politicians to account is a fundamental principle in restoring accountability and restoring trust. We're going to be going, Mr. Speaker, into probably the nastiest, dirtiest election campaign in Canadian history. And we see already that millions and millions of dollars by this government is being used in a massive air war, supposedly to promote government programs, when in fact it's promoting the narrow interests of the Conservative Party with the same narrow taglines, the same kind of coloured advertising. Canadians see through this. They see that this is an abuse of the public. So what we need to do is find a better system to ensure accountability. The partisanship, that can continue. The air wars, that can continue. But it should not be done through the use of taxpayers' dollars and the abuse of taxpayers' dollars. So certainly, Mr. Speaker, we will be supporting this bill, and I'd like to encourage my Liberal colleagues to call on their provincial colleagues in Ontario to stop the Wynne government from stripping the basic bills that is in place right now that prevents her from doing such blatant, naked partisan advertising. I'd like to ask them while they're at it, they should also call on the Premier to stop the privatization of Ontario Hydro. Didn't she run on a plan to be a progressive premier, and anyway, she's doing stuff that would make Mike Harris blush. I'm asking my Liberal colleagues to do the right thing and at least call her out on that.